Om. We bow first to Nar Narayan and Devi Saraswati before uttering the first word of this greatest endeavor. Jai. Invocation. Om Ganeshaya Namaha. Invoking the power of the infinite Om. With the tip of your ink dipped tusk, you first recorded this tale of tales as dictated by the Venerable Krishna Dvipayan Vyas. May this scribe's humble attempt to traverse again that great ocean of stories please you, Lord. Idam Naman. Chamapan. To every person I have ever known, I join my hands in humility and beg forgiveness for any error I committed, knowing or unknowing, even though you and I are two distinct individuals separated by walled in compartments of self, yet when you lose, I don't win. The path of true and lasting peace brings with unconditional forgiveness to end the war without let us first end the war within. Chami Dukkadam. To the gentle reader, the song belongs to they who listen. We had a pact, you and I, that I would transport you on wings of song from Ayodhya to Lanka and back again. Now that journey is done, and we prepare anew to embark on another greater voyage across the ocean of Itihas. Listen now, my friend, for like the first day, the new song I began is not just mine to sing. The road already the Kurus descendants from the line of Bharat, he who was born of Sakuntala, the hermit's daughter, and Raja Dushyant, who failed to recognize his own progeny at first but later acknowledged his lips and embraced both his neglected wife and son. Bharat and his descendants then ruled over the rich alluvial plains in the land of the five rivers, lending his name to their lineage as well as the subcontinent inhabited by the Kuru race. In time, Raja Santanu, a descendant of Bharat, came to love a woman of eternal beauty, never realizing that she was in fact the river goddess Ganga, crushed to take mortal form of a period. Santanu and Ganga's time together was a torrid melding of as fierce as the river herself in spate, but eventually it was doomed to end, the terms of her curse and exile from her true home having been fulfilled. Ganga had to return home to her watery course, taking with her the sole surviving son of her union with Santanu. The illustrious son of Ganga and Santanu, named Devavrat, was raised by his mother and great phobia Himvrat, lord of the great mountains ranges, and was imbued with godlike talents and abilities. Santanu's grief at losing the love of his life was mitigated to some degree by the joy of having regained a son so illustrious. He had no rival in any world, for Devrat was the epitome of dharma in his deeds and words and in every conceivable way. He was a demigod in power and spirit, capable of besting the most formidable mortal army single handedly, indestructible, indestructible, indestructible in pitched battle or single combat, and was in fact blessed with the gift of immorality until the day he voluntarily chose to end his own existence. He could have possessed any woman he desired and was desired by all women. Yet he surrendered his own conjugal pleasures and abdicated his own claim to the Kuru throne in order to satisfy the demand of the fisher king father of the fairy woman Satyavati. For though the manipulation of the river goddess, Santanu had rediscovered love. a love as epic almost as the one he had shared with Ganga herself. Meeting the fisher's king's daughter on her boat as he was ferried across the river, Satru was overwhelmed by the desire for the young girl. But so different was their station from that of the Kuruj that her father feared that with a son like Devrat in line to inherit, no son of Satyavati would ever have claim to the throne of Hastinapur, and without a skin on the throne, Satyavati would be no better than a concubine. People would say that Santanu had married a lowly fisher girl only to fulfill his own lust. Devvrat, the ideal son in every respect, could not bear to see his father's heartbreak at being denied by chance at love. Yet again, mindful of his own mother's part in orchestrating this union, and knowing that she felt responsible for ensuring that Santanu found joy again in life, he prepared to undertake a great and terrible sacrifice. Devrat saw that the only way to ensure his pater's claim to love and joy was to sacrifice his own, and so he undertook the terrible vow for which he earned the name Bhishma, swearing he would never join conjugal relationship relations with any woman throughout his mortal existence, and never lay claim to the Kuru throne himself. Bhishma then urged his father to marry Satyavati and rediscover love again. Reluctant at first, Santanu eventually caved in and married the fisher king's daughter. For a while, all is well. Santanu and Satyavati live in conjugal bliss, and in due course was blessed with fine and litigious male heirs, while Bhishma's administration expanded the kingdom to an empire like the likes of which had never been seen before in the subcontinent. But eventually, through a series of misfortunes, the sons of Satyavati both died, leaving behind childless widows. The Kuru throne lay empty, for owing to his terrible woe, Vishnu was only a regent. He could never rule the kingdom in his own right. Satyavati argued that he should release himself from his woe, but he refused flatly, saying that the earth could stop turning and the sky may fall, but he would never rescind his vow. So she then attempted to persuade him to father sons upon her daughter-in-laws, as was the custom under the circumstances. Yet once again he refused, displaying the adherence of Dharma that had made him a legendary name among men. At that wit's end, the Dowager Queen finally resolved to send for her own illegitimate son by a prior union, the sage Krishnadvipayan, now gaining fame as the collector of Vedas and henceforth titled Vyas, laying the problem. Now gaining fame as the collector of Vedas and henceforth titled Vyas, laying the problem. Progeny before her son, she requested him to cover her daughter-in-laws and sire hers to the Kuru throne. Vyas agreed that what she asked was permissible under Dharma in these circumstances. He agreed to do as he asked, but cautioned her to ensure that the princesses were completely respective, receptive, and agreeable to the union too. For it was they who would bear his seed of fruition. Eager to see the Kuru throne occupied, a legitimate legitimate her. Satyavati agreed. Both the princesses Ambika and Ambalika were unwilling and uncooperative during their respective acts of caution. Their behavior greatly displeased the great sage Vyas, earning his displeasure and his curse as a Brahman. Hence, although he had seeded their wombs, one son was destined to be born blind, the other abnormal in appearance. A third son, the only one that would be born whole and possessed of all faculties, as befitted a king, was fortunately sad upon the princess's maid and could never claim the throne. Such mishaps as the great sage Vyas eloquently praised it could will could well be the seeds of future conflict. He then vanished with the potent power he wielded as the result of his meditative strength, leaving the dowager Queen Satyavati to ponder on the future of Kuru Resh.